have is, if I walk slower, will you clap longer? So I met Johnny Compton last year at the Texas Book Festival. He was doing a signing. He was kind enough to say the phrase that everybody in education loves to hear: anything you need, I love to give back. So we were like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to put you to that. And I'm really happy that we were able to arrange this. He wrote Spite House, Best Horror Book of 2023. He's a Stoker. I don't want to read the bio yet. I'll read you the bio. I'm really excited to bring horror to academic spaces as a legitimate means of meaning making, as a legitimate means of storytelling. I'm really grateful that we have the freedom to do so. It helps that our dean is a horror fan, but more importantly, a champion of academic and intellectual freedom that we really appreciate. So I'm really happy that we get to do this tonight. I'm really happy to talk to Johnny, and I'm really excited that you get to hear him read. So here he is. Johnny Compton is a Stoker. Johnny Compton is a Stoker Award nominated author whose short stories have appeared in Pseudopod, Strange Horizons, the No Sleep podcast, and several other publications. His fascination with frightening fiction started when he was introduced to the ghost story The Golden Arm as a child. The Spite House, his debut novel, was released in 2023. His second novel, Devils Kill Devils, was released in 2024, and his short story collection, Midnight Somewhere, arrives winter 2025. Johnny Compton.
Hi, everybody. Let's see if I can get the mic set up. Is it this thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm tall. Thanks for being here.
Yay.
Thank you for being here.
Of course. So, everybody here is a fan of horror? Or at least open-minded to it? So I wasn't sure exactly which one I wanted to read. Got two of my books here, The Spite House and Devils Kill Devils. If you haven't read either one of them, I'm a little bit biased, but I like to think that they're both pretty great. I wasn't sure which one I was going to read necessarily, but took a little bit of inspiration from Eli here, just trying to introduce horror to the community. So I'm going to read from my second one, Devils Kill Devils, the opening chapter. I don't like reading in the middle of a chapter, or the middle of the book, because I always kind of feel like then you got to set the stage too much with a bunch of well, these characters, you haven't met them yet, but if you read it, this person's related to this person. It's a lot, right? So instead, I was like, which opening chapter do I read? I love the Spite House opening chapter, but it's comparatively tame. And I feel like for an opening chapter purposes, this one kind of sinks his teeth into the reader, so to speak, pretty quickly. She clicked the light switch on the hotel room wall, and in the infinitesimal space between the absence and arrival of light, a space undetectable to the mind, much less the eye, Sarita Bardalis saw someone who could not be in the room. A tall shadow standing near the window, featureless but facing her and Frank nonetheless, watching them enter. The shape disappeared before the click of the light switch left Sarita's ears, too quickly for anyone to have ever been there. Sarita told herself that it had been a product of her inebriation, but she had still recognized the man within the silhouette in the fraction of an instant it had appeared to her. She took this recognition as additional proof that she had imagined him. He had no reason to be there now, at the close of this perfect day. 6 months ago, after watching mutual friends suffer restless children, condescending relatives, and unhelpful friends at their wedding with hypnotized smiles on their faces, Sarita and Frank promised each other that their nuptials and reception would be different. They would set rules and see to their own wants first, and anyone who wouldn't be happy to attend under their guidelines would be free to stay home. Sarita had gone so far as to co-author her maid of honor's brief speech, though that was primarily due to Tori admitting she was concerned about saying the wrong thing. Given Tori's state of mind the past few years, her obsession with the flexibility of reality and the power of prayers and spells, Sarita thought it prudent to help Tori find words appropriate to the occasion. Frank's biological mother, Hera, took issue with their plans. She wanted to be the first in line to dance with her son at the reception, but he had every intention of giving his stepmother, Misty, that honor. The latter had been in his life for 22 of his 27 years, during which time his birth mother had been fitfully present, which was, arguably, for the best. The faint scar that divided his right eyebrow and the deeper, curved, and jagged rows of scars on his left arm strengthened that argument. Still, Hera had insisted on having the first dance because she was his real mother. And that, to her, was that. Frank told her he loved her, but she could either accept what he wanted or not attend. She formally declined the wedding invitation soon after, as did most of his family, save for his grizzled bulldog of an uncle, Everett, who attended as an ambassador of the Stallworth clan rather than an eager guest, although he broke down as the reception ramped up and danced almost enough to make up for the rest of the family's absence. Sarita and Frank agreed it was for the best. Simple resoluteness had guided them through a terrific day, an ideal day. Everyone in attendance, so far as Sarita could tell, had had a wonderful time. No stress, no pressure, no awkwardness, no drama. It had been, as she desired, a carefree celebration. Now the wedding was in their rearview mirror, overtly pleasant, colored in the warmth of a generous buzz. Just ahead of them, close enough to kiss, was their first night together as husband and wife. Frank brought her to the large bed, tried to set her down, but fell forward himself and pushed her halfway to keep from falling on her. She laughed so hard she briefly lost her breath. The shadow man she had imagined a moment earlier was as close to forgotten as could be. She rolled toward Frank as he turned onto his back. "Next time," he said, "I think maybe we should go a little easier on the vino, just a thought." Her fingers toyed casually with a lock of his brown hair. Next time we get married?" He looked at her. His smile widened. "You know this is all a practice run, right? It has to be. People talk about the day they get married as being their best day, but it's really not supposed to be that. Nothing's ever this good. So we'll have to break up at some point and start this over again, just a little more down to earth and realistic next time." "Makes sense," she said. His cologne and the wine on his breath comforted her in ways she didn't want explained. Like she wouldn't want to read a textbook study of why cocoa tastes sweet, and then why sweetness is coveted, and what receptors of the brain get placated and whatnot when you eat chocolate. Some things were enriched by a little mystery. Love, she thought, was among those things. "I've told you I love you today, right?" Frank said. "Not counting the vows. Wait, I put I love you in the vows, right?" "Don't ask me to remember anything right now, babe," Sarita said. "Best I can tell you is I know you said I do. That happened. Oh, and right after that, you started shouting, 'My chick is hotter than yours,' at everybody in the room. I'm sure you're making that up. It happened. I was shocked, but flattered. I don't think my mom appreciated you yelling that at my dad, though." He chuckled, then kissed her. She had changed into a sleeveless white knee-length dress following their ceremony. He was still in his black tuxedo, but he'd lost the tie and unbuttoned his shirt a couple of hours ago. Now she removed his jacket and untucked his shirt. He sat up, back against the headboard, and she straddled him. They kissed intermittently until he started to laugh at her inability to get the first button open. She laughed too, looking down at the button near his waist. "Are you wearing a chastity shirt? What the hell?" When she looked up at him, the seriousness of his expression startled her so much that she needed an extra second to realize he was not looking at her. He was looking at something behind her. Then Sarita sensed it. A dimness had stolen into the room. Something else as well. A third party. Him. Goose flesh rose on her skin, and she had an unconscious urge to scratch all over, to make her nerves go away. It can't be, she thought. Why would he be here? When she looked back, she saw him. Angelo stood at the foot of the bed, dressed in black. Strands of his long, flaxen hair hung over his face. Through the thin curtain of hairs, he met Frank's gaze with an ash-hot glare. Sarita had never seen him this close, she realized. The only other time she'd been this close to him, she'd been unconscious in his arms. Every other sighting had been at some distance. Now she appreciated how muscular and simply immovable he looked. He was a stone-skinned statue, well over 6 feet tall, hulking and unnaturally lean all at once. Even through his clothes, this could not be more evident. His fists were balled tight. He made no sound, seemed not even to breathe. Is the hotel on fire? She thought. Fire or a bomb, active shooter, something. We've got to get out of here. Before she could explain this to Frank, to find the words that would convince him, he took Sarita by the shoulders and moved her to the side, then moved ahead of her. He tried to speak, croaked, cleared his throat, tried again. If you want money, you can have it. I won't fight you over it. I have credit cards and I have a little cash on me too, all right? My wallet's still in my pocket. I'm just going to take it out. I'm not trying anything as long as you don't try to hurt my wife. Before Frank could reach for his wallet, Angelo reached for his throat. His massive hand clamped around Frank's neck and lifted him from the bed, took him toward the balcony windows. Sarita leapt toward Angelo, grabbed his arm. She wasn't a slight or weak woman. She still carried a little of the muscle she had acquired in high school playing softball. Nowadays, she ran, did a home boot camp workout somewhat routinely, and also wasn't too particular about what she ate. Despite all of this, she hung from Angelo's arm like she was a child. Smaller, she was a doll. So too was Frank, at the mercy of Angelo's strength. What the hell are you doing? Angelo, listen to me. He's my husband. He's not going to hurt me. What are you doing? Frank tried to pry Angelo's hand free with one hand, punched him repeatedly with the other. He may as well have been punching a wall. Angelo slammed Frank into the window. The glass cracked but held. Frank's pupils rolled up. His face was turning blue. Angelo, stop! Listen to me! Angelo! He flung her away, more forcefully than she could have expected. She tried to hold on, lost her grip, flew over the bed, and fell headfirst into the side of the honeymoon suite's oversized, heart-shaped bathtub. A heavy, dull ringing enveloped her head, pushing all other sound into the far distance, like she was wearing a vibrating church bell for a helmet. Darkness overtook her for a moment, then receded to reality. A voice called to her. She couldn't truly hear her name through the stuffy haze of her concussion, but she knew the voice, sensed its urgency. It was Frank. Something was wrong. He was in trouble and still on the other side of the room. The face before her, staring at her with concerned, guilty eyes, was not her husband's. Why? She said, to her guardian angel. A hand with a gold wedding band on the ring finger came over Angelo's face, tried to claw at his eyes. Angelo turned, raised a fist, brought it down. Frank's pained scream sliced through Sarita's head. She tried to lift herself up from the floor and the room tilted. Her stomach contracted and she almost vomited. There was no strength in her arms or legs, but she couldn't let that stop her. She needed to move. She needed to do something because Angelo's fist was up again, down again, up, red and wet, then down, again, and now Sarita could hear the impact of each punch, a mallet crushing a sack of sticks and mud. She crawled forward and grabbed Angelo's back. He stopped, turned to her, eyes swimming with insanity and hate, and then shame. He looked away from her. He stood. The room went black as though he had commanded it to. Then the lights flickered on again. Angelo was gone. Sarita wished she could follow him, disappear with him, partly to keep fighting him, beat him until he answered her question, why? But more than that, she wanted to go away with him to avoid confronting what remained with her in the hotel suite. She could see Frank's legs where he lay on the floor, but his upper body was blocked by the end of the bed. She called his name. He did not respond, did not move. She called it again, more urgently this time, as though he were playing a cruel prank and she meant to let him know with her tone that it had gone too far. Still, he did not move. She crept over to him. No, Frank, oh God. The pulped ruin of her husband's skull made her gag. A wealth of blood spread across the floor from beneath what little of his head was left. She wanted desperately to deny what she saw, tried to will it to disappear the way Angelo had. Instead, it stuck in her vision like a broken claw. When she tore herself away, its scar remained in her mind's eye. God, please, she said, eyes still shut, begging for a miracle. She'd believed since she was a child that anything was possible, that heaven sometimes intervened to save a life that should have been lost. She'd been the direct beneficiary of this 4 times. Now she pleaded for one more miracle, just one, for Frank. She looked at him again, and nothing had changed. He was still dead, defaced, unrecognizable. She screamed loud enough to be heard beyond a room designed to contain a different kind of screaming. It was raw and powerful, purposeful. It was as though she was trying to call a weapon into existence through sheer force of horror, anguish, and rage. Something sharp, heavy, and hellish enough to gut an angel. Thank you. That's all.
And that's how we open.
That's
Devils Kill Devils.
that is the opening chapter of Devil's Kill
The opening chapter,
Devils.
setting a tone.
Trying to with that one for sure.
Thank you for that. We were joking around beforehand about eyesight, and I knew that when I sat down to do this, I was going to lose everybody in the audience so that I could see this. So I want to start with kind of the big question: why horror matters? Let's start with that.
Horror matters. This is a great question, great leading question. I think horror matters for me primarily because it's kind of the earliest form of storytelling in a way, and it's the most primal, in my opinion. It's the most natural, in a sense. I mean, we could tell any kind of story over a campfire. There's nothing that says we have to tell scary stories over a campfire. There's nothing that says when we're having sleepovers as kids and the stories we make up have to be scary stories. Something in us wants to tell scary stories. And I think it's because the world is a scary place. We're born screaming and terrified and pushed out of a very comfortable place and into this bizarre world that we have zero control over. And from that point on, we're trying to deal with all the scary elements of the world, whether they impact us directly or whether they impact somebody else or anything else. I think about this a lot, like the concept that we're no longer part of the food chain, which is like such a bizarre, rare experience when you think about it compared to the rest of every other living thing. I take my dog out the back, and the lizards that were just chilling on our back porch go scrambling into the tree because something about 100 times their size is chasing after them and would just casually kill them. So they're running terrified for their lives. They're experiencing horror. And then a squirrel that likes to show up in our yard might make its presence felt, and my dog goes chasing after that. And the same thing happens. And it's like, man, imagine if we were still like that, like as human beings, and just walking around trying to go about your day, and then tiger. So, oh my God, run for your life, because we can't win this fight. And I think that's the basis of like kind of existence in a way. And we've evolved enough to be able to grapple with that. And horror is an essential way to grapple with the concept that life is scary and it ends, and that's inevitable. And why not write about it in a variety of ways?
Yeah, I think I land with you on that, and I think if you wanted to duplicate or replicate the idea that human beings are not the top of the food chain, we could all go be trainers at SeaWorld, right?
I mean, we've seen things that nature will remind you. There's and I can't think of her name. There's a YouTube video I just saw that reminded me of this, but I used to do a podcast called Healthy Fears. I talked about a variety of things. One of them was animal attacks. I did an episode on the concept of animal attacks in fiction, compare that to real life. There was, I believe, an Australian woman, I want to say she was like a doctor or something, but she was attacked by a crocodile and survived 3 death rolls, which, as the name would imply, a crocodile death roll is supposed to roll you into death. And somehow she rolled with it and emerged alive. But she wrote about it later, and she said one of the things, I don't think she actually said this, but she wanted it to say this to the crocodile at the time, which she wrote, was that she was thinking, I'm not food. And I was trying to convey that to this animal. And of course, the animal's like, yeah, you are. Not only are you food, you're like a kind of a delicacy here. You don't have antlers, or your bones are pretty brittle compared to the stuff. Like, I got to eat elk and others. Like this is amazing. Like if you guys could like lose this clothing that you deal with, you're all fatty and lean muscle. This is terrific. This is eating healthy. So yeah, like there's stories like that like I've stumbled across, and it's like a hardcore reminder that all you got to do is step into the wrong place in the wrong situation, and this thing that you literally cannot reason with. If you're out there with a bear and you're unfortunately Timothy Treadwell and you think the bear, I've gained a great relationship with the bears and they love me and they've considered me one of their own, and then unfortunately you end up, along with your girlfriend, mauled and eaten, and your dying screams end up in a Werner Herzog, well, not really heard, but heard by Werner Herzog in a documentary. I mean, make the wrong mistakes, and nature will remind you of how horrifying the world can be.
It's interesting, too, to think about so many people that read for an escape that into horror, because it ends up being a very safe place.
Yeah.
Like a low-stakes place to experience the highest stakes possible. And I kind of I love the escapism into the practice realm, so that we know how to do the fear and the anger and everything in the real world. And I hope that we're all better at what we do than that crocodile was at Crocodiling. Easy one, or maybe this is a hard one. Favorite book, favorite movie?
Favorite movie is very easy. Favorite horror movie is Alien. And I'm going to have to stop hard right there, because I will talk to you for 30 minutes easily about all the reasons why I love Alien so much. Favorite book is a little harder to pin down at any given moment, but the one that always pops in my head first, because my default setting is ghost stories. So Michelle Paver's Dark Matter, fantastic ghost story. It's also set in the Arctic. I love Isolation. It's like Arctic Gothic. It's like crazy. And like, I like the cold as a setting, like brutal cold as a setting for horror, and it does that as well. So it gives you everything. It gives you the isolation, ghost story, brutal, horrific cold. Awesome. Just awesome overall.
Dark Matter.
Yeah.
I can see it sitting on my shelf right now, not unread yet.
I would highly recommend it to anybody if you love a good ghost story, especially in an unusual setting. She wrote a second book called Thin Air that is not a sequel and not a remake, but might as well be kind of a remake of Dark Matter. It's really weird. But I love that one too, even though I don't think it's as good as Dark Matter, but it's set similarly, isolated setting, cold, even like character development is a lot of the same, ghost story, but it's set in a mountain peak.
When you think about the Gothic, I mean, we immediately go to spiky towers and fog, right? But we often don't talk about the isolation of the Gothic and translating that to other settings. Why? Maybe this is a personal thing, but why for you is the cold and the isolation such a powerful thing?
Great question. I mean, the isolation, I can definitely track that to a teacher I had in high school who was the first person that really gave me the deep dive into Southern Gothic. And that's my teacher, Mr. Comer. And I don't know where he is these days exactly, but I hope he's out there somewhere still teaching people, because he was wonderful. And he brought up, the elements of the grotesque in Southern Gothic, the grotesque, decay, and then the isolation, for whatever reason, really got to me. And the idea of you're alone in this. Even if you're surrounded by people, by others, if you're experiencing something, you can feel very isolated. And especially as it relates to like a ghost story and being targeted by something that other people can't see, or if you're cursed, these kind of components, you can feel. I can be up here, and heaven forbid if some kind of weird curse came up and started tossing me around the stage here, everybody's here with me and they can see it, but I'm alone in this experience. Nobody can really help me. And for some reason, I don't know why, but the cold just seems like the natural state of horror. My book, The Spite House, goes into a lot about the idea of not just cold spots like you hear on paranormal investigative television shows or something like that, but like a true, like bone-chilling, freezing cold. I'm wondering if it's like just rooted in like childhood stuff, because childhood stuff crops up and you don't even realize it. There's an old song called "The Ghost of John." Has anybody heard this? Like
what?
The Ghost of John. Have you seen The Ghost of John? Long white bones with the skin all gone, and then you sing, ooh, wouldn't it be chilly with no skin on? It's like, yeah, it would be chilly with no skin on. It'd be super cold not to have my skin on and somehow be alive. And I mean, like, that's a song that's, you know, when I was a kid anyway, like 6-year-olds would sing in like class around Halloween time. And I think that just kind of stuck in my brain maybe as like, this is like the ultimate like weather condition that belongs with horror. Yeah, like the freezing cold of being dead sounds like just appropriate somehow.
Yeah, it kind of tracks with isolation too. I mean,
Yeah.
I think of loneliness as a very cold thing.
Yeah.
Right. When you're talking about Southern Gothic and the curse, I think about Donald Ray Pollock a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And Knock 'em Stiff, his collection, where it's and it's not horror unless you've lived that life, and then it's extraordinarily horrific.
I mean, it's Pollock's writing. It's very Southern Gothic,
Yeah.
and it's. I mean, like it's if you like horror, it's that style of like crime, grime, like fiction that like it may not be explicitly horror, like you mentioned, but I mean, The Devil All the Time.
Yeah.
I remember reading that and just being like, this is like some of the most troubling stuff I'm going to read all year.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can. I mean, I'm a big believer that horror kind of bleeds into a lot of other genres in a lot of respects. So you can definitely mine some horror from something like his work.
Yeah, I think that's something that I end up talking about quite a bit is how horror or fear as a vehicle fits everywhere, right? And I want to kind of get to a little bit of that too. Spite House, Devils Kill Devils, and the story that I had my students read, the Death Grip Challenge, all kind of seat themselves in a family bond, family conflict, family trauma. And I have several questions about that. But the first is, what feels efficient about horror to tell those stories?
Man, it just feels like to me, like you bringing up the family trauma and like how horror can kind of apply to something like that. I took inspiration for those stories from like a lot of my beloved family members who were actually really kind and good relationships I had, but it always feels like you read stories about other people's lives and unfortunate things that happen in the news and such, and it's like, this could turn. This could go the other way so easily.
Yeah.
And that's super scary, especially because you got to deal with it more directly when it's family. Like if it's a parent or something and you're a child, I got to come home to this. And so there are so many stories that are metaphors. And this goes back to like what you said, like why horror matters. It might be difficult to get certain people, whether they're directly experienced with it, whether it just makes them uncomfortable, what have you, to read a story that's just explicitly about a child trying to overcome an abusive parent. But what if that parent isn't explicitly abusive necessarily, but a werewolf?
Yeah.
Or it's like Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf that was made as the movie Silver Bullet. And it's like, this is a way of like, maybe it's too weighty to talk about Catholic priests abusing their power in children when, all those scandals happen. But we have a story that, even though it wasn't written as that in the moment, it can now be applied as a metaphor for some of this. Whereas, spoiler alert, I guess, my bad on Silver Bullet, but it's the priest. He's the werewolf in the town.
It's 1984.
I was going to say, it's like a 40-some-odd-year-old movie almost now. So,
would you?
yeah. But yeah, like you can transfer a lot of that into a metaphor. So applying it to that kind of family dynamic, I think, is why horror is so sufficient for telling that kind of story, because it's so malleable and then so transferable. So if something even written prior to a certain event or scandal or happening, what have you, you can write about that. And then it becomes applicable later on. And I don't want to say no other genre can do that. I'm sure they can, but it just feels really, really available to the horror genre.
Yeah, and I think I think when we take those stories out of horror and put them into realistic fiction, they become so much harder to read. And I'm speaking very specifically about the book that I don't recommend to anybody because it was the most disturbing thing I've ever read. The Girl Next Door, right? Is all of these things minus the supernatural.
Yeah,
You know? Jack Ketchum, and making us complicit in the act. And I just have a hard time recommending it. It's so perfectly good at what it does, and what it does is so awful for us.
Yeah, and I mean, it's based on an actual unfortunate real life incident as well. And it's, like you said, that can be really, truly like traumatizing almost to read. But if you want the less traumatic version, but that can bring somebody into discussing it a little bit, the more serious version of it later, oh, my mother's a vampire. Like, that's the fantastical nature of it makes it where, okay, like, this is still a horrible situation to be in, but I can use it as an allegory for certain abuses as opposed to launching you directly into, you need to confront this horrific reality immediately.
And there's a sense of accessibility to it too, because we dress up for Halloween as vampires and werewolves and all these things that serve as these metaphors for these traumas.
I mean, even when you get into specific characters that people dress up as for Halloween or other events, and then you read the actual, or you watch the movies and you have the character bio, it's like, I was a kid, I didn't know, like, I didn't fully dress up, but I had the Freddy Krueger glove, because to me, Freddy was like, man, he's so interesting and cool. And it was like, you start watching more of the movies as you get older, and like, so the child predator, child serial killer, murderer, who had a hotline. I mean, like, I'm old enough. If you weren't, a lot of younger folks here, there used to be a thing like 1-900 numbers you'd call a hotline, and it was like, talk to your favorite band, and it wasn't really them. It was just like a recording of like whoever, and they'd like pretend. Freddie, and like, so they'd have that for bands and like cartoons and like friendly characters. And then there was like the Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy Krueger hotline. And it was like, call and listen to me tell you stories. Haha, kids, get permission from your parents. It was always like the little quick disclaimer on the commercial. Get permission from your parents before you dial. And like, you can actually go and listen to those stories now. They're like collected. There's a YouTube channel I went and found. They collect all of those stories that are, it's like each one's like a minute long or something, minute and a half, and it's amazing.
Which is $40 on a 900.
I mean, exactly. It's crazy that was even legal.
I can't imagine, Mommy, can I call Freddy Krueger on the phone?
There's no way kids were asking the permission. Kids were just calling this line. But it's like, you think about like all these iconic characters that people love, and it's like through horror, and it's kind of like, it softens the blow, and then it lets you get mature enough to hopefully understand at a certain point, like, okay, I don't know how much I should idolize certain characters.
Right. I think talking about real life translating to horror, I think segues us perfectly as consumers into writers and how life influences writing. And I have a few things I want to talk about this, but I want to start with. When was it for you that horror was the thing?
Oh man, I mean, like, sort of like you said in the bio, I mean, it wasn't necessarily the thing as a writer, because writing wasn't the thing yet, but I mean, when I heard that ghost story as a kid, 5 years old, kindergarten class, Mrs. 9 RIP, played a record, and I mean, like, it's fascinating for me, like, as analog horror has become a thing, and it's cool to me to, like, see younger people be like, it's creepy, like all these old ways that these oldies used to get their physical media. But it's true though at the same time, because like an old vinyl record like has that static naturally to it. It sounds more like an artifact. It's not crisp, almost like something's being buried in it. And she played that for the class, and there's somebody reading this old ghost story, which if you've never heard the story of the Golden Arm, it's just like one of many stories in the style of a person is buried with something precious to them, in this case a golden arm. Somebody else digs it up, and then that person returns from the grave to stalk them through the night. And heard that in the class, and just was immediately blown away. And just horror immediately became my favorite genre. And like when I would go to the school library, all I wanted to do was check out. We only had a relative handful of scary story books. Those are the ones I checked out over and over. When it was the book fair, I went straight to. We were talking a little bit earlier. We had some dinner earlier. You mentioned Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. That was like the holy grail for like. I remember I grew up in Mississippi, and all my friends, all the kids in school, like you'd have different books. That was the book to have. That was like, oh my gosh, you've got a copy of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark beyond basically anything else that we could have been reading at the time, and it was spooky as hell. The illustrations were just iconic.
So good.
And so like it just never stopped for me there. Just local legends and local alleged hauntings and ghost stories, and I would freak myself out every time I heard about them, but I would always ask if I overheard anything about, oh, there's supposed to be a haunted hospital in Biloxi. Really? What's the story? Pick up on that. Kid I knew named David told me Bloody Mary lived in a big ugly house behind the Hardys a few blocks away from my house, and I used to have all these crazy nightmares about being stuck in Bloody Mary's house, but I couldn't get enough of it. So it became the thing when I was like super young, and by the time I started trying to write, it was just, there was nothing else that even really came to mind as what else to write about.
Yeah, coming out of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, just before that for me it was Banicula. So going into that, and then looking at, I'm picturing covers too, because there was a fun horror, like Goosebumps was brightly colored, and like Saturday morning cartoon, right? But then Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was that ink blot, red eyes. You are going to see this when you go to sleep, kind of cover. I don't know how to avoid that.
It was great.
It was so good.
I absolutely loved it. I mean, like, I'm not crazy big spender or anything, but I have been fortunate enough. I got the book deal and everything. My big spending spree in my office, I bought some like artwork for the walls when I got my first advance. And one of the things I found somebody who did a mural on Etsy back before Etsy got all clouded with AI slop, unfortunately now. But I was able to get somebody who'd drawn a mural of like their favorite drawings, replicating their favorite drawings from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And I've got that on my wall. I freaking love it.
There's I wish I remembered his name. There's an artist that was doing just daily inkblot monsters on TikTok.
That's awesome.
I'll find his name. I'll send it to you.
Please do.
Yeah, it's
Can't
so
get
good. So moving from starting to write to working through Spite House, right? So I want to make sure that we talk about how to balance life and writing. And let's talk about Spite House and what that process was and what you were doing at the time and how you made time.
Sure. Yeah, I was working at a bank at the time, and I was a corporate trainer. And I spent years trying to get a book done, and I've been fortunate enough to have sold some short stories. I'd had some intermittent short story sales dating all the way back to 2006, really a little bit before then, but that's when I started counting it. But I kept like kind of running into mental blocks, and then finally some things inspired me. I was like, I'm going to write this book. I'm going to finish this book. And trying to balance that, I had a very supportive, my partner's here today, and she's incredibly supportive, and it was like sometimes I need to just lock in and write, and she's been with me a long time, and she tolerates the weirdness of me being a writer, where I will look frustrated sometime, and she's like, babe, what's wrong? And I'm just like, I just shake my head, and she already knows that's the code for like, oh, he's working through whatever. So even if the computer's not in front of me, it's like I'm working through a character, I'm working through some dialogue, I'm working through how do you do this plot line, what have you. So there was that. There was the mental energy aspect of it, which, being a corporate trainer, I enjoyed it. It's not like, oh, I'm roofing or anything. I'm not like out here doing incredibly hard work. Even by corporate America standards, it's probably, from the outside in, I think, looks easy. I will just say that, like, I did a lot of different jobs in corporate America. Mentally, as much as I enjoyed corporate training, it's like one of the most draining things. It's the most mentally draining thing I had to do, because you can't have an off day. Because you come in, you know what it's like. You're a teacher. I'm doing that just in a corporate environment. And so it's like I'm Mr. Compton, basically, to like a bunch of oftentimes younger adults, and that are here entrusting me for their career and their learning, and I can't have a headache even if I have a headache, and I can't be sad about whatever news I received about a family member the night before, even if I'm sad. It's like I'm here for them, and I have to maintain this mental upbeat energy, and it's time for class to start. And all right, guys, I gotta pick my voice up, and it would just like feel like a mental crash sometimes when I clock out. And then I'd have to figure out ways to resummon that energy, because now I got to get in front of this computer and do this thing that I really want to do.
Yeah.
And I got to finish this damn book.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so how do I, summon that? And it took some time to figure out how to compartmentalize a little bit of, okay, like that's a different kind of energy that you need to have. And then when you come to the book, this is the fun part. And just remembering that, like, don't look at it as though, man, now I got to go and sit in front of a computer, even though it kind of replicates the experience of being at work. But I'm sitting in front of a computer, but this is the fun part. And just reminding myself that anytime I'm devoting to this, even when it's frustrating, writing is pretty great. This is all I've ever wanted to do with my life.
Yeah, it's that now I get to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were going through the day job, get home, do your writing at night.
Yeah,
That worked well for you.
I mean, a little bit of
it worked out well. Yeah.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit of like between like breaks, even at work, a little bit of like lunchtime, especially if it was something where like as momentum built and I was getting to the last few chapters, it was like, man, like anytime I could sneak away and do this, writing a little bit. I mean, I started off writing by hand for the longest time, and every once in a while I still do that. I mean, my first attempt at a novel back in 2002 or so, I wrote the first 20,000 words by hand in a notebook because I didn't have a computer at the time. And I wasn't like poor, I was just an idiot who was broke. There's a big difference between broke and poor. I want to just specify, because I'm like, I didn't have a computer at the time. Like, oh my gosh, like, no, it's because I was spending on stupid things. Next thing you know, it's like, oh, well, I can't afford to have this computer. But it was still like, I wanted to write this so badly. So I wrote until like my brother gave me his old computer. I wrote the first 20,000 words by hand, and I still had that habit. So I had notebooks stashed at work, and it would be like, okay, I'll just transfer this later on. And I would just take out the pen and pad, and my brain's still on fire. And again, kind of compartmentalizing, okay, I'm talking about banking and, very mundane computers or figures and percentages and stuff. But then it's like, as soon as that stops, I need to be able to pick up the pen and go for it and get to this scene and get to this moment, because I can feel it. I can feel my momentum, and I didn't want to break that and lose it. So, I mean, for a while there, that was the balance, but it was like a sprint toward the end for sure.
We were talking. There's something else we were talking about earlier too that I want to bring into this. When you were working, doing the day gig and working through those things, and I love the phrase "brain on fire" because that's kind of what it feels like. It feels very much like you're reading a paperback you can't put down, and now you're writing the book that you can't get out of your head fast enough, right? How important, or what kind of writing community did you have at the time, and how important is that, or was that then, or is that now?
I mean, man, I didn't have any writing community at the time, unfortunately, and I wish I had. I was just kind of in between. I'd had one online that was significant enough that one of my good friends, an author named Jamie Mason, is somebody who I met through this online writing community, and he's still a really good friend of mine, wonderful writer. And so it was that significant, but I just left there. I was not happy with kind of the online moderation and directions they were going. Just some things happened that I felt like, oh, some of these people are not the people I thought they were, maybe, behind the scenes. So I left them like a few years prior to that, and then I'm not always the most sociable person. And so I do a poor job of going out and meeting people. I always feel like I'm bothering people. So if I'm like out and about, and even if it's like, especially back then, like I'm writing something, but I'd go out and I see other people writing. I'm at any kind of a festival or anything like that. I'd always be like, I'm not going to go up there and ask them anything or talk to them about anything. Please, if you have that opportunity to ask somebody about their writing process or whatever, 99% of writers love to be helpful. So don't feel like you're bothering anybody. Go up and talk to people. I was always like, I'm not going to go bother people. So I had no community. So it was just like me. My support was family and friends. And that was basically it. And, immediately after, basically, when I sold the Spite House, however, I started meeting more people and feeling a little more comfortable and getting over imposter syndrome a little bit. And then I realized how much I've been missing out and how much better and easier it is when you just go out and talk to other writers, talk to readers, talk to people who are just passionate about stories, and kind of give some energy to them and also receive the energy back. And you guys help each other out, and it's beautiful, and it's sustainable, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to writing is kind of a solitary exercise, but dies without community, right? And I think back to like we were talking about going to Stoker Con, or I would go to my MFA residencies and be around writers for an extended period of time, and come back and be like, okay, it's the brain's on fire, gotta go.
Yeah, I mean the energy that you receive, especially at those like conventions or festivals, anything
Or
along those lines.
Events like
this is amazing. Like you have people that show up. It's crazy. Like it's so easy to not show up in the world. And so anytime I've done events where it's like 3 people show up, and I've done events where it's like I can't even it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm at this literary festival in Seattle, or in an island off the coast of Seattle, and it's like a packed room with like 200 people that are mostly there for John Scalzi, but I'm there too. Counting my win. But then you get to talk to all those people that showed up for this, and then they're coming up to you afterward. I never heard of you before, but what else are you working on? What are you writing? Oh my gosh, you said this up there, and when John said this, and you guys were both like, have you met before? You guys seem like you're old friends, and it's like, this is great. This is what it's all about.
Yeah.
But the writing is what gets you there, and you need that community aspect in the midst of your solo journey as a writer.
Yeah, the isolation of like the writerly gothic.
Yeah.
You need to escape from that. We got to come together. So we've got a few more minutes for this. One of the other things that I want to make sure we get to, and these are bigger questions. What do you wish you'd have known, or would have known, before you started writing, that would have made successful completion, or whatever your definition of success is, easier?
Probably the biggest 2 pieces of advice I give to people, and this is based on what I would give myself. Don't self-reject is one of the biggest. If it's not good, let somebody else tell you it's not good. Don't tell yourself it's not good. I mean, if it's truly not what you want to write anymore, if you're like, I'm not feeling this, I'm not the right person to write this, what have you, by all means, move on to something that you're more motivated to write. But if you're just doubting because you're like, well, I think this is good, but maybe nobody else is going to think this is good. What do I even think I'm doing? We all go through it as writers. I mean, I was just reading earlier some interviews where George R.R. Martin talks about, even late into his career, where he'd have days where he's like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Like, where did all my talent go? So the crisis of confidence is a thing.
Like everything after the last season of Game of Thrones, he's asking that question.
No comment. I literally can't comment because I never actually watched Game of Thrones. I know. I'm a Philistine out here. But we all suffer with those moments where you're not sure. So have enough belief in yourself to, at minimum, not self-reject. When I mentioned I sold short stories, all of my best short story sales, the short story that you said you had your class read, among them, they were all rejected by somebody else before they were bought. And in every one of those cases, for my best sales, they were rejected by somebody else, but then the person who bought them, the publication that bought them, was a bigger platform, paid more money, all of these other things. So don't self-reject. And then my other piece of advice is read less writing advice, read more writing. And I wish I knew that too. And I've adopted that mantra hardcore, which is not to say don't read any writing advice. Obviously, there's some incredibly valuable writing advice out there, but I see oftentimes, and I was guilty of this for a time before I changed my mentality, people want to like kind of find a list, 10 pieces of advice about how to write your novel, and it'll be sometimes even written by an author. Yeah. And it's like, okay, you're probably better off reading that author's work or reading that author's 10 favorite books than reading this list of 10 things, because that list of 10 things is not going to be one size fits all. It's not always going to be applicable. And so you get a greater range of what can work and what doesn't work, and the idea that what doesn't work for you might not be the same as what doesn't work for the rest of the world, and vice versa, if you're actually reading the work as opposed to reading shorthand advice.
And you get a sense of how they break their own rules, too, and where they break their own rules.
And how other people misinterpret their quote-unquote rules. I mean, I don't want to get into a whole rant, but there's like this list that comes up all the time of Elmore Leonard's 10 Rules of Writing.
I kind of love that book.
But it's a longer, it's a text that he wrote. And like I've seen people just reduce it to a single sentence.
That's true.
And like share it online, like on Twitter or something, or on wherever. And it's like you're truncating something that had way more nuance. And if you actually go read the original text that he wrote, he gives multiple examples of this is somebody else who did it differently, and I love their work.
Yeah.
This is the reason why I do it my way, because this fits my voice. And it's Elmore Leonard, who I think is, he's one of my idols as a writer. I love Elmore Leonard's work. I hate the way it's been has been truncated for kind of the fast food version of writing advice. And so to me, like you say, reading the book, that's reading the work, not reading the quote unquote advice version of it. Same thing with like if somebody tried to just take the opening line of every chapter from Stephen King's On Writing and turn that into like, oh, this is writing advice. It's like you're missing all kinds of context and nuance and times when he says it's okay to break this quote unquote rule. So you got to read the work as opposed to the advice. And I know it takes longer, and we're all short on time and whatnot, and it takes more effort. But I would encourage my past self that if I could, and that's why I encourage anybody else to do that as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Losing that context and the nuance. I mean, that's what I love about the book. It's not so much the rules, it's the way he kind of messes. He doesn't take himself seriously in those rules, and we lose that. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Well, thank you, Johnny. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, of course.
We're going to open up to questions, and how this is going to work is I'm going to stand up and bring you a mic. You're going to ask questions, I hope. And there we go. I was, and then my knee hurt.
I know like horror can have a certain balance to it. How, like when writing horror stories, how do you avoid like reaching the point of like absurdity? Like there's definitely like a certain point where it's just like this is scary and like this has gone on way too long. The moment's gone. I don't feel anything.
Man, that's a great question. Trying to avoid, like you said, the point of absurdity is, I'll give an example in my mind of how this works. And this is like an old reference to an old movie that unfortunately a lot of you guys might not have seen, but bear with me. There's a movie called RoboCop from the 1980s. And if you know the behind the scenes of it, so there's this moment, and it's still kind of very gruesomely funny. It wasn't funny to me when I first saw it. I was like 10 years old when I saw RoboCop, way too young. I think I might have been even younger, actually. I might have been like 8. But we didn't have like the warnings the same day. I digress. The scene at the beginning when Ed 209, the giant robot, obliterates, he malfunctions. He's supposed to be this new militarized super cop robot. And he malfunctions in a boardroom meeting where they've stupidly used the live rounds for him. And he targets one of the corporate board members and just shoots him with like 100 bullets. And it's like gruesome and horrible. The director, Paul Verhoeven, meant for that to be a joke. But because the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America that does the ratings, didn't understand that he wanted this to go on for like another 30 seconds because he was like, it will go absurd. It will be horrifying if you shorten it because then it's just like still close to realistic amount of shooting this guy. If you let me shoot him 1,000 times, it turns into like a Monty Python sketch. Like it's the difference between like seeing somebody's arm cut off in like Braveheart or something and the Black Knight in Monty Python where it's like, what if we cut off every limb and he still wants to fight? So I kind of reverse engineer that for horror and kind of keep that in mind. Like this can go comical very easy. What I just read, Devils Kill Devils, that opening chapter, I've had that opening chapter in mind, and this concept for the story in mind for a long time. My original version of that was way more absurd and gruesome. Like he just beats his head in the story. Angelo just beats Frank's head in, and it's just fist comes up a few times. My original version of that, poor Frank, and Sarita were actually in the midst of marital bliss, the honeymoon night. They're having sex. Angelo comes in, rips Frank's head off in the middle of them having sex, and like tosses it aside, and then Frank's like bloody stump like goes all over Sarita's face. And I was like, that would be crazy. But also that turns, maybe not everybody else would see the humor, but I thought that would be hilarious. And I was like, that's not what I'm going for. That's the absurd. So as you mentioned, horror has boundaries. This is where the boundaries lie. And everybody's perception of it is different. But I've run into those scenarios. And so I just try to keep in mind that idea. And you can apply it to ghost sightings in your story, more subtle things. You can apply it to body horror transformation, demonic possession, everything. There's a moment, I remember when they re-released The Exorcist, and some people were heard to be giggling in the audience, and people were like, I don't understand. And it's like, well, I kind of get it. You kind of start uncomfortably laughing because it's kind of over the top. And I love The Exorcist, but Reagan's possession like starts to go to a certain place where she's like, your mother's doing certain things in hell to the priest. And it's like, that's kind of a funny line. Like, there's a reason why Richard Pryor, like, in SNL did a whole joke about that after that movie came out. Like, so it's like, you can take things to a point where it's like, I'm saying something, or I'm doing something, or I'm displaying something so extreme that it turns into the absurd and turns humorous. So just kind of keeping that in mind. And it never hurts to kind of scale back a little bit, because the shock value is still there and it's still going to be present, even if you just give people a glimpse. There's a lot of great, gruesome, horrible, allegedly or reputedly horrific moments in a lot of horror fiction that when you actually watch it aren't that bad. It's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre had this crazy reputation of how gruesome and gory it is. It's not that comparatively gory. I remember for years as a kid, Alien being my favorite movie. Before I'd seen it, other kids who'd seen it were like, oh my God, when the thing comes out of his chest, and then like they're describing it. And then I remember seeing it and being like, that was pretty hardcore, but also that happens a lot faster than I thought it would. I thought we were gonna linger on this. And it's there, and then it's gone, and then you're just dealing with the aftermath, and that's almost worse. If I get longer to look at it, I can like start absorbing it and processing it. When it's there and it's gone, it's just like, oh my God, that happened. And now you're expecting me to move on. That's a little more horrific. So I try to keep all those things in mind. Great question.
So I distinctly remember buying the Mad magazine for RoboCop when it came out back in the day. Yeah. And was a young kid who thought it was funny that the guy got liquefied and what have you. But I wonder, as you kind of have a trajectory from being a fan or an aficionado of horror to becoming a practitioner and having more of an intimate experience from the perspective of craft, how does that change the way that you engage with the work of other people? I mean, do you still find that you like view film and read literature as a fan, or is there like a different kind of critical faculty that kicks in now?
Man, I'm fortunate enough, great question. I don't feel like I view it from that much of a critical lens, or at least not that much more of a critical lens. I do kind of feel like I'm viewing it from, I sometimes admire, I have more admiration for stuff that I like, but just in a different capacity now. When I'm watching a movie or I'm reading a book, I notice now that when I realize what somebody's doing, when I was watching Sinners, and it's a little bit of I kind of wish I didn't have this anymore because it kind of does break the suspension of disbelief a little bit. But it's like, man, I was like, when I was watching that, I was like, oh, like the first act and the way they're setting up characters. And I was just like, I think I know what they're doing. And I admired it, but I was also like, part of me was like, man, I do kind of miss just being fully absorbed instead of admiring technique. You know what I mean? It's, I don't know, I can only imagine that it's like the difference between if you're watching sports, and I don't know anything really about like boxing, you know, like as far as like, I just know you're punching people, right? If I like learned more, I'm sure I'd admire it in a different way, but there's part of me that would just be like, I kind of miss when I didn't have to like, oh, like he does a feint here because this is the Jack Dempsey method of blah, 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 and he's dipping here, and this is the Philly shell defense and all these things that I've heard of, but I kind of have no idea what it really means. I kind of like that I don't know what it means. You know, it's kind of like just lets me be in the visceral thrill of it. And then now I'm watching like a haunted house movie, and I'll be like, oh, the way they're using the negative space here to give the suggestion that anything could be here at any moment. I really admire the way they're doing that, and all these other things. It's like I do admire it, but part of me misses just fanning out more purely, so to speak. So it's not critical. I try to have much more of a positive lens toward it, but it is something that I kind of miss about just being able to just purely be, like you said, an aficionado of it.
I'm going back to a composition question. How and when do you know to embed details or imagery or points of views while not over-contextualizing or overwhelming the reader?
Man, that's a great question. I'm always trying to remember, so what is my objective of a scene, a chapter? What is my objective with a certain character? Fleshing certain things out allows you to get a little bit more embedded into the story, hopefully, right? So if it's about somebody who's going to be long-term in the story, does it matter if I add a detail about what kind of shoes they have on? Well, is this going to speak to what kind of person they are? If I'm pointing out that they always have their shoes polished or whatever, or they always have their shoes looking beat up or something like that, and I'm trying to convey, a sense of, in a shorthand, this speaks to their disposition. They always like to have their shoes polished because they're a posh person, or they're a little sloppier. That's why their shoes are always untied or something like that. I try to keep those things in mind. Sometimes I just add it for a flourish just because I think it's interesting. I mean, there's nothing wrong with really doing that, but if it can enhance the story, I definitely try to keep that in mind. I also try to keep in mind that you're going to have to rewrite this probably regardless. So I'll add certain things, details. I've added details in a story about the setting, like you said, something about the character, something that seems like an aside, and then 10 chapters later, I'm glad I planted that seed because now I get to use it down here. This is going to be useful. But then if I'm going back in my rewrites later, and it's like something I added that's not really useful, and I feel like this is just here disrupting things, that's what rewrites are there for, so you can clear it out. So I try not to, if there's an idea I have, my first instinct is I had the idea for a reason, probably put it in there. And my process is I try not to overthink that first draft in terms of like, oh man, but like, does this need to have a reason? I'm looking for one, but if I don't find one, I'll keep it in there. I might be able to use it later. And if I can't use it later, okay, this is what the cleanup is here for. Like, I'm going to rewrite it. I'm going to rewrite it again. Different people have different processes. I've got a friend of mine, Josh Roundtree, who barely rewrites because he is like, I've got to get this chapter down pat first before I move on to the next thing. And that's his technique. So you do whatever works for you. I shouldn't say he doesn't rewrite, but he doesn't rewrite like comprehensively. It's like rewrite one chapter like 10 times before I move on to chapter 2. whatever you got to do that makes it work. But for my process, because I know I'm going to have to rewrite 3 or 4 or 5 times anyway, at minimum, before it even goes to my copy editors and everybody else. All right, let's keep it in there and see if it works out and see what happens and see if I enjoy it. And then when I go back and rewrite it, if I like it, I'll keep it. If it's useful, even better. If not, you can shed it then.
So when hand-selling your books to my friends, which I do quite often, I say the difference between the Spite House and Devil Kills Devils is that the Spite House is more atmospheric horror, where this one is more violent supernatural horror. When you go to write 2 different things like that, what is your mindset? How do you get into that, to get into the mood for that? Because you have to feel it, I feel, to be able to write it well.
I mean, good question. I don't know that I have like a tremendous. I probably do have a tremendously different mindset, but I do like literally. I mean, I'm one of those people who like I put on music that I feel like fits a certain mood to write. And sometimes before I even fully write, I'll listen to a certain song that I feel like I've always liked this song that makes me think of this or that. I've got like a list in my phone of songs that I would play if this was the movie adaptation. And I sometimes will put that on and think, this is what I would play if I had this scene. And I'm always thinking about those kind of things. So I'm sure that has to be influencing my mindset. I don't know how overly conscious, other than doing those things, but I didn't really try to reprogram my brain too much as far as like the difference between writing The Spite House versus writing Devils Kill Devils. Both of them, I just try to make things scary, and I just try to like catch whatever moment that I'm in, hopefully, and bring, what I feel is appropriate to each thing. And I because I consume a lot of, like my default is if I can't think of anything else to do when I'm turning on the television, I'll click on Shudder, or I'll go to Tubi and pull up one of the dozens of horror movies I have queued, from old Hammer horror to like some new indie slasher. So I have a huge range of stories that I watch, and then when I can't think of anything else to read, I'll go pick up one of the books. One of the perks of being an author, I've been blessed enough to have a major publisher. I have a lot of free books. You get so many free books, it's kind of ridiculous. So I have a lot of reading material to choose from, and I can go through those. And so because of that, I have it like just kind of stored in the bank anyway, like, oh, if I'm writing a ghost story, I kind of know how to make this atmospheric. I hope, at least based on things that I've always admired and enjoyed. If I'm writing something more visceral, I feel like I know how to hit the gore and hopefully not make it too much and make it absurd. Or if I'm going for a little bit of absurdity and I kind of want you to laugh, maybe how to hopefully do that as well. It's all swirling for me, from my personal style. It's like constantly swirling up here. Like, I am going to die with stories in my head. I've made my peace with that. Like, I have too many story ideas. I'm getting new ones all the time. I'm literally just constantly, as I'm behind the wall over there and we're doing the introductions, I was like, wouldn't it be crazy if like I started like turning into like a monster back here? And like they're like, nobody knows it but me, and like I'm having like, what if I like had some kind of weird demonic spirit that just popped up randomly, and I've had this secret the whole time, and this would be like a super inconvenient time, and everybody's here, and it's all very pleasant, and then I walk out and I'm trying to hide it maybe, and everybody's like, why is one arm behind his back? And you don't know that's my red right hand. That's all going through my brain back there. It's just constant. I can't turn it off. I love it so much. So for me, it's like, whatever it is I'm gonna write, it's just sort of permanently activated. And I'm fortunate in that respect, so I don't have to really try to think about adjusting my mindset, because I'm always thinking of when I drive past a building, it's like, oh, that's weird, those windows look weird, I wonder what kind of ghost is in there. I'm always asking people questions about ghost stories. I was at a convention in San Antonio recently, police officer that's running security was walking by, flagged him down. I said, "You got a ghost story?" Because I've heard like every first responder allegedly has a ghost story. He was like, "I sure do." And he told me his ghost story, and it was great. And I was like, "You're not going to bank that, right? I'm an author. You see what I do here." He's like, "Yeah, go ahead, use it." He's like, "I'm not a writer. I'm not going to do anything with it." Perfect. So it's just constant for me. I mean, I feed off of it. I love it. So I'm fortunate. I don't feel like I have to consciously adjust my temperament or mindset whenever I'm working on different styles of horror stories. Wonderful questions. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, this was awesome. It's time for some thank yous. Thank you, Johnny, for being here. We appreciate you very much. Thank you, Prudence, for running a department that allows us to do these kinds of cool, crazy things. Thank you to our Dean, Tonio Ramirez, for loving horror enough to let us do this stuff too. And thank each and every single one of you for showing up, being here, being part of the community. We appreciate you. And we thank you very much for buying a book on your way out that Johnny can write his name in on the way out. Thank you for being here very much. Thank you to Birdhouse for being here, selling you your books. We love that too. You're all fabulous people. Buy books, read more, enjoy your evening.
Thanks, everybody.